My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review for The King's Man. Not The King's Men, The King's Man. There's a space between the kings and the man. One of the worst titles ever? Very likely, yes. But this is a movie that I was really looking forward to because I love the first Kingsman movie. The second one, we don't talk about, but the fact that they were bringing this franchise to World War One, I feel like could give it a fresh spin, and after seeing this movie, it did not, and this is probably the worst movie in this franchise, and it really bums me out to say that. What I think is the worst part about this movie is that I heard rumors that Matthew Vaughn wanted to make a World War One movie, but the studio said it had to be tied to some sort of IP. So that's why they made it a Kingsman movie. And while you're watching it, you can get a sense of that. The first Kingsman movie is a wink and a nod to the spy genre, while you get none of that here. This is a movie that takes itself very seriously, and if you ask me, it takes itself too seriously to the point where you can't have fun with it. Like, I thought this movie was very slow and very boring. And to see a franchise that felt fresh, it felt new, to just feel as safe and formulaic and as boring as this movie did, it really bums me out. Let's talk about the cast. Ralph Fiennes is such a fantastic actor. He's great in almost everything he's in, and I'm still shocked that he doesn't have an Oscar yet. But this might be his worst performance. You can just tell that he's not trying. It feels like he's sleepwalking throughout this entire movie. And when you compare his performance to Colin Firth's performance in the first movie, you can tell that one person cared about the movie, was passionate, tried his hardest, and the other one didn't, and it just feels like Ralph Fiennes didn't care. His son, played by Harris Dickinson, was awful. He doesn't have an ounce of personality or charisma, and he was just a very boring character. There's like one point in the movie where his entire worldview changes in like 1 minute and you don't buy it. So I also thought he was a poorly written character. And those two characters and their relationship, their being father and son, is supposed to be the emotional core of this movie, and not once did it actually work. They beat you over the head with what kind of dad Ralph Fiennes is, and it's just way too overdone. You're like, I get it. You can stop doing that now. And I never cared for these two characters or their relationship. Then you've got Gemma Arterton, who you can just tell the studio thinks she's going to be a fan favorite, cool, badass chick, and every attempt at that just feels very forced. I never liked her in this movie. You got Dejong Hansu, who is a talented actor, but just gets completely wasted in all of his movies, and that continues to be the case here. When the movie gives him something to do, he's really good, but that doesn't happen too often. Then you got Rhys Ifans playing Rasputin, and I like the fact that he was willing to go big and bold with his performance, but it also didn't work for me in any way. It was just way too much and just way too excessive. There was one scene with him and Ralph Fiennes which I just didn't like at all, and he has to say fuck every 5 words, and it just feels so excessive at a certain point. So I get what they're going for with this character, but I didn't like it. And unfortunately, from the very beginning, you can just tell that this movie is going to be a mess. Like, you've got the cliche emotional opening, you've got the cliche villain introduction, and you're just like, wow, this feels very formulaic. And then for the first hour of the movie, it's trying to give you all this information on World War One in the fastest possible way. So it's just montage after montage after montage, and you can't even just take in all of the information because they're just giving you way too much. And it doesn't feel like it's getting given to you in a natural way. It just feels like exposition dump after exposition dump after exposition dump, to the point where the actual story of this movie doesn't kick in until the last act. That's how messy this movie is. And like I mentioned earlier, I wish Matthew Vaughn got to make the World War One movie he wanted to make, but all the Kingsman elements of this movie do bog it down. They try to answer questions from the very first movie, but they're questions that nobody had. Like, to go into the tailor shop, you have to say a code, and they say the code, and they explain why that's the code in this movie. And it's just like, I don't need that. I don't need that explanation. It could be a code that changes every week or something. I don't need to know. Matthew Vaughn is a director that if you asked me back in 2015 after the first Kingsman movie came out, who would be one of my favorite directors working nowadays, my answer would be Matthew Vaughn. Like, he made Stardust, which is one of the best fantasy movies of the 21st century. He made X-Men First Class, which revitalized that franchise and did a great job with it. You've got Kick-Ass, which is just a kick-ass superhero movie. You got Kingsman The Secret Service, which is just an awesome spy movie. So he was dipping into all these different genres and just finding ways to freshen them up. And back when Kick-Ass 2 came out, everyone's just like, well, this is a bad movie because Matthew Vaughn didn't direct it. So when he was coming back to direct Kingsman 2, everybody was just like, yes, now it's going to be a great movie. And then Kingsman 2 came out and they made every wrong decision and it was just a really poorly directed movie, and now you got this movie as well. Maybe he's just a director who's not meant to stay with one franchise, and I just miss the Matthew Vaughn who existed before the second Kingsman, because I really do think that he was one of the most promising up-and-coming directors. And we just don't get that sense here. This movie is poorly directed. It feels like the studio made someone watch the first Kingsman movie and ask them to replicate that style. And the issue I have with that is that it's directed by the same guy. It feels like he's impersonating his former style. It doesn't feel like he's bringing anything new to this movie. You know, there's a few inventive things he does when like there's two people sword fighting, there's a camera on the sword. And that's a really cool idea, but it's shown for like 3 seconds and then gone. And you're just like, they could have done something cool with that. But there's not. There's an action scene with Rasputin. And this should have been a fantastic action scene that would just be right up Matthew Vaughn's alley. But the actual execution of it was just lacking in every way. The only action moment that really stood out to me in this movie was this one that takes place about in the middle of the movie, just a bit past that, where it's nighttime and there's these two groups of people fighting. If you've seen it, you probably know which I'm talking about, but that was the only action in the movie where it feels like he was trying to do something different. There was stakes and tension in that action scene. It just bums me out that he doesn't bring the same level of inventiveness and style to this movie that he's brought to his other movies. Because he is a talented filmmaker, and I hope his next movie is much better than this one. I really do. There's also some really bad CGI in this movie. The final fight has some green screen effects, which might be some of the worst green screen I've ever seen. There's a few character decisions which really annoyed me. Like right before the final fight, they're coming up with a plan, and this one guy's like, I won't do that. And I thought it was a joke at first, but no, he actually refused to do that. And then this movie has a mid-credit scene, setting up the next villain in this franchise. It's a spoiler-free review, so I won't reveal who it is, but it's something alright. But there are still some things I liked about this movie. Like I said, I do like that action scene in the middle of the movie. In the last act, even though the action isn't great, it's still when the story kicks it into gear and when it's at least entertaining. So I did like the last act of this movie. I like the music. And there was one decision made in this movie that I found to be very bold, very risky. And for a minute there, I was very shocked they went there. But then I feel like they just did nothing with it. And after like 5 minutes, that huge moment kind of felt irrelevant. And I just wish they found a way to maintain that weight for the rest of the movie. Like for a second there, I was really impressed, and then 1 minute later, I was disappointed again. Look, I'm just going to go ahead and compare this movie to the original because I don't know why I would ever choose to watch this movie over the original, because they both have a relationship between an older gentleman and a young boy, and it's much more developed and a lot better in the first Kingsman movie, and you do care for those characters. And they're not even father and son like these characters are. The first movie has fun, stylish action moments that really worked, while this movie tries to do that, but completely falls flat for the most part. The first one has characters with big personalities that stand out in a positive way, while this movie has very dark characters and one character that was big and loud in a very negative way. The first movie is perfectly self-aware of what kind of movie it is, while this movie takes itself way too seriously. The first movie had humor and energy, while this movie had neither. Like, just watch the first Kingsman movie. There's no reason to watch this one. It's a bad movie. It's a terrible movie. It's a disappointment in every way. The story was just as bland and as formulaic as they come. It's very messy. The characters are dull. This movie was just one giant letdown. I love the first Kingsman movie. I was excited when they announced the sequel. I was disappointed after the second movie, but I was still excited for this one. And now I'm at the point, well, this franchise needs to end, and I wish it was only one movie. And it bums me out to say that, so I'm going to go ahead and give The King's Man, not The King's Man, a 3 out of 10. Okay, have you seen The King's Man? What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.